Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Jay Jacobson, who's here to share with us his new book, Lead by Legendary Example. So are legendary leaders born or shaped by the moments that test them the most? Well, today's guest is here to share insights on just that. Jay Jacobson is a funeral director, business owner, and leadership mentor with more than 45 years of experience serving families, developing teams, and shaping public policy. His career has taken him from small-town funeral homes to national legislative hearings, where he has testified before the United States Senate on behalf of bereaved families and ethical standards in funeral services. So welcome to the show, Jay Jacobson.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. So what inspired you to write this?
Well, I never really did set out to be a writer. It's something that literally was born out of crisis in hospital rooms and waiting rooms. My wife went in for what was supposed to be routine knee surgery 2 years ago, and it went horribly, horribly wrong. And so through the time of sitting in waiting rooms and sitting in our hospital room, I was writing, documenting everything that was going on for our two daughters who were not able to be there. So they knew basically up to the minute what was happening. And the more I wrote, the more things started to creep in about some of my reflections on leadership, resilience, and presence. And when I got done with writing all of that, it started to have the shape of what would be, I felt, a good book to pass on to particularly my two grandsons.
Well, what a profound legacy you're leaving for your family. So, what does it mean to live leadership rather than to declare it?
Well, a lot of people have titles: manager, boss, supervisor. Those are just titles. Unless you can actually inspire people, get people to follow you, follow a direction, establish direction that people want to follow, you're truly not a leader. A leader is more invested in the success of the people around him than he is his own success. And I think that's the biggest thing that separates bosses, managers, supervisors from true leaders.
So, earlier you mentioned that you were going through this really horrific time with your wife in the hospital and going through this family crisis. So, what did moments of crisis and grief teach you about leadership?
I think the biggest lesson I learned through that whole process was the value and the reinforcement of the value of being present. And a lot of times I'll say, you want to be where your feet are. You want to be in the room that you're in. You want to be with the people that you're gathered with. And everything in our society today pulls us away from that. Video screens, telephones, cell phones, all demand our immediate attention. And just by being able to set those things aside and really be conscious about knowing what's happening in the room, paying attention to the people around you, actively being engaged in listening to what they have to say, and just being able to be quiet and listen, I think are some of the biggest lessons I learned through that whole period of time.
Those are some remarkable lessons. And how did that experience then lead you to testifying before the U.S. Senate?
Well, the testimony before the United States Senate was born out of my role as a funeral director. I had started up the ranks of leadership in my state association. and formed a relationship with our Iowa senator. And we were in the process of rewriting some regulations that would govern the way funeral homes interact with their customers, would offer more consumer protections, would better streamline the way funeral directors and funeral homes operated. And through that relationship, they began having public hearings and then eventually open Senate hearings on some of the regulations that they wanted to propose. And I was asked if I would be willing to sit in and represent funeral directors across the country in those hearings. And being 27 years old, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'll do this. And so we started planning for what we thought was a very congenial uh, hearing that we were just supposed to be giving information. And so I flew off to Washington, D.C. As soon as I got off the airplane, I was met by our lobbyist from the National Association who said, we've got an issue. We had gotten the list of the other witnesses that were going to present and realized that funeral service was about to be ambushed. And so over the next 36 hours, we spent all of that time without sleep, rewriting and researching the testimony that I was about to deliver in front of the world. And it was very difficult. And it was hard because I had to remember that I was representing a very caring profession, and I was doing it in a very public way. We wanted to be respectful of the senators. We wanted to be respectful of the process, yet we wanted to be true to what funeral service really was, and to point out that there were errors in what they were presenting as facts, that there were errors in the way, and even in the data that they were using to come to those facts. And so it was a very tense time. It was very tense in calling your state senator out in an open hearing and facing the ramifications of all of that.
That's just remarkable to be in that position and come out the other side, because I think most people, I know if it was put on me to go and do something like that, I'd probably panic, because all of a sudden you're having to come up with rebuttals or information that you weren't really prepared for.
Well, and that's one of the things about developing leadership early on. And I really trace back the early development of my leadership skills all the way back to being a paper boy at age 9 and having the responsibility of delivering that newspaper every morning, having the responsibility of collecting the subscription price for it every week, and learning to be present with the my newspaper customers, that a lot of them were subscribing to the newspaper not just for the information, but also for the fact that on a Thursday night they knew their paper boy would stop in, and that might be the only visitor they'd have all week. So it was an early lesson in being present with people who are very lonely and being able to spend a little bit of extra time. Drove my dad crazy. It took me forever to collect for those subscriptions, but that's not what was important to me. What was important was what we were providing to those people that didn't have visitors. But those kind of lessons throughout your life help you prepare for those heavy moments of crisis. You begin to understand who you are. You begin to understand what your personal mission, what your personal values are. And if you spend a lifetime of understanding those and developing them, of honing them in, when crises like having to sit before a Senate hearing come around, you're prepared for it. You always rely on who you are, and you don't waver from who you are. They can throw anything they want at you, but as long as you stay true to your integrity and your mission, you can make it through anything like that.
Oh, what great advice to share, especially coming out the other side and having that experience. And you mentioned integrity, and I want to touch on that a little bit. Why is integrity often tested in everyday decisions rather than major moments?
Integrity is actually built in those small decisions. We all think about the great big issues that we have to deal with, and that's when integrity shows itself. But it's really practiced in those little tiny decisions that the truth comes out. The truth is practiced when there isn't a great deal on the line. And people learn to trust you when, in the little things, you practice integrity. When they know that your word is true, and it doesn't matter whether it's in raising children or supervising subordinates in the workplace. If they know they can count on you to be consistent, they know that they can count on you to be honest. They know that they can count on you to give the full story. They're going to trust you and they're going to follow you. And it is really the cornerstone of what leadership is. If people can't trust you, they certainly will not follow you.
That is such the truth. And people can smell that a mile away.
Absolutely.
So earlier you mentioned presence. So, what does it really mean to have presence in leadership?
Presence is a commodity that is harder and harder to get, particularly with newer employees. One of the things I've done a lot of studying, and I do a lot of training with young funeral directors, young to the profession anyway, about how to be present, how to understand when you're sitting with a grieving family, how to be fully in that moment. And it's very difficult, particularly for folks right now that are 20 to 30 years old, because exactly at the time that these 20 to 30-year-olds were supposed to be learning the skills of being able to read a room, to understand the non-spoken language, the body language, they were handed a cell phone. And all of a sudden, their world became digital. It became short text messages. It became email. So just being able to look somebody in the eye and see the pain in their eye, to look at a room full of people and see the one person in that room who really has something to say but hasn't been given permission to speak yet, and being able to call on that person and say, I think you have something to add to this conversation, are skills that they haven't learned, and they need to. In funeral service, we have about 3 minutes from the time we sit down with the family we haven't met to form a relationship, to establish trust. And if we don't do that in the first 3 minutes, we spend the rest of the time we're working with these grieving families and trying to redevelop that trust. So a great deal of my time is spent in helping individuals understand the importance of being fully engaged, particularly in that first 3 minutes, and then all the way through to the very close of serving the families.
So, how can someone really develop trust when it counts?
It is by understanding that that's how you've lived your life. It's you can't arrive at a crisis and all of a sudden be able to obtain trust from someone. You have to have practiced it. You have to have lived it throughout your life. You have to know that when the small decisions are being made, that you make those with clarity and you make those with integrity. If you don't do that, people can sense it. And so in a crisis situation, you want to have already established that kind of a practice where people know that they can depend on you. They know that your word is good. If you're going to be at somewhere at 10 o'clock in the morning, for instance, you're there at 10 o'clock or earlier. If you tell a family you're going to call them before noon the next day, you make sure you call them. It's little things like that really start to build the trust, and people understand when you tell them something, they can depend on it. So that when the bigger things come along, what they see as the very important things, they don't worry. They know that this has already been handled. He said that he's going to take care of it, and I know he will.
Well, the business experience and just the overall experience you've had in life, I can really see how this book was perfect for you to write. So I understand that you've seen leadership under extreme pressure. What separates leaders who steady a room from those who lose it?
I got to see a really good example of that on a large scale. Back in 1989, we had a United aircraft that crashed here in Iowa, and 112 people did not survive that crash. And so Iowa funeral directors were called in to help assist those who did not survive. And we had about 150 funeral directors that arrived on scene when we were asked, and had to work together to take care of all of those who did not survive. And it was a good illustration of how different leadership styles come across in crisis. We saw everything from people who got very, very quiet, who normally weren't, to people who became extremely animated, that was not their norm. We saw people step up that you would not have expected to have things to add to the organizational structure, had deep insights into things we hadn't thought about that we needed to. And just watching all of that unfold before us. And we also saw people throughout the week we were there in the stress of the leadership fall apart. And the stress of everything that was going on turned to things that weren't healthy for them. So it was a really good example of what leadership can do in those kind of situations.
So, how would you say your faith has really shaped the way you lead?
It's central to everything that I do. Without a strong faith, it's hard for anybody in this profession to survive long term. I was very fortunate early on in my career. One of the first places I worked, there was a dichotomy of funeral directors. There was the 85-year-old senior Paul that was deliberate, he was consistent. Whether he was working in the funeral home or he was working in the community or he was in his church, he was exactly the same. His faith was important to him. He was steady. He had been married to the same woman for over 60 years, and everything in his life was ordered. It was consistent. The younger Paul was just the opposite. He was very good when he was at work. He could turn it on and he could be very professional. But as soon as he left that arena, his life was in shambles. He did not have a strong faith. He turned to alcohol. He turned to drugs. He ultimately ended up losing his business and his family. But throughout my career, that's just been a reminder that there are very strong things you need to have in your life. You need to have good balance between your faith, your family, and your workplace. And if you get those out of balance, then your life becomes a shamble. And you have to constantly correct throughout your career to make sure those are in check.
So, what leadership lessons did you learn in funeral service that apply directly to business and everyday life?
The biggest things that are the ability to be present with people, the ability to sit in a room, to look individuals in the eye and to feel the pain that they're feeling, to be able to listen to the stories, no matter how long or how many times they've told you the same story, to be able to let them release what they need to release, to help mitigate the crises that happen in a room like that. Because when we're dealing with families in funeral service, a lot of families are broken. A lot of families spent an enormous amount of time avoiding each other. Out in the real world, they can do that. They don't have to come to the family gathering. They don't have to go to the holiday party. But when it comes time for a funeral, they have to come together and make decisions. And so, as a funeral director, we have to navigate the stress and the tension in a room. And every arrangement conference we have is a critical conversation. And being able to navigate those critical conversations and direct people to make decisions when that's really the last thing they want to do is an important skill in terms of funeral service, but it also transcends into the regular business place because every day business people are navigating those similar kind of stresses. Employees who don't get along, supervisors that are difficult to work with, subordinates who may be difficult to work with. How do we get them to communicate? How do we develop culture that allows everyone to speak freely? How do we create that safe environment? But I think that's the number one skill that good funeral directors bring to business in general.
I would think that that is one of the major pieces from just your book and this discussion in making sure that you're there as serving as a servant leader, as you talk about in your book. Because
Yes.
my
Yep.
goodness, I mean, you're meeting people on probably one of their worst days.
Yes, and we're helping them navigate that. We're helping slow down the process. People in stress are going 100 miles an hour. They're trying to think of all the things they have to do. And as a funeral professional, we're there to help them relax, to slow down, to take the time that's necessary to spend time not only dealing with the details that have to be processed, but dealing with the emotions, taking time to remember, to reflect, to really live in the moment and understand that the person that we're helping them plan a service for was important to them. And how do they want to remember them? How do they want to remember the joys and the sorrows that made up their lives? And when we do that right, when we really do it right, it's something that's wonderful for the family and it's wonderful for the community.
So I know many people, they look at leadership and they think, okay, this has to be a very strong role. We have to get there, get in charge. But again, I mentioned servant leadership. You look at that in a much different way.
Absolutely. Leadership is a soft role. It isn't, it doesn't come through strength. It comes from service. It comes from helping the people around you be successful. I share a lot with young funeral directors about when you do your job correctly, you're almost invisible. You spend all this time doing the work, getting everything prepared, everything organized. And then the day that the actual service comes around, if you've done it right, nobody even notices you're in the room because everything flows the way it should. And that's the way leadership should be. You should develop skills in people around you so that when crisis comes, when the real activity of the work you're doing is going on, nobody notices you in the room. And so if you're absent, the people around you rise up and function in a way that supports the mission that your organization has, whether you're there or not.
You've talked about people that you've mentored quite a bit, and I find this completely fascinating. I think if someone can be a leader in the funeral service industry, my goodness, they really have like a head start in most other industries. So, how does mentorship play in creating leadership that lasts beyond one generation?
That's probably one of the most important things leaders can do. It's great to develop leadership skills. It's great to be in charge. It's great to see things in terms of a mission and a vision being advanced. But if that's all you do is make sure that that happens, you're missing the real benefits of the long game. Teaching your replacements, so to speak, teaching those around you, being able to leave a legacy of the level of care that you've developed to help them understand what it takes to be a legendary leader themselves is probably one of the greatest gifts that I've been able to pass on to those that I've mentored. I'm very fortunate. I've had wonderful people that have worked for me. When I ran my funeral home in central Iowa, I took a different stance when I hired people. We occasionally we had to have the need of high school kids to like mow grass, wash cars, and a lot of my contemporaries would hire somebody who did nothing else so they could be fully focused on the funeral home. I took the opposite tack. I hired the busiest, most involved athletes, musicians, scholars that I could find. These were all people who were in everything. Their schedules were completely full. They were not able to hold down a regular job because of the schedule constraints. But I'd hire these young people and I'd say, now listen, we're going to need to have cars cleaned for this funeral on Thursday, 3 days from now. It's up to you to have them clean and ready by 10 o'clock Thursday morning. Never had to worry about it. They'd always find a way to get it done on their schedule. Sometimes that might be 2 o'clock in the morning, but they always got it done. And with the mowing of the grass around the funeral home, I would tell them, I don't ever want to have to call you and say the grass needs mowed. You drive by the funeral home every day. So if you see the grass needs to be mowed, you stop and you mow it. I never had to call and have any of them come and mow the grass. It was always done. But I've watched these same people go on to be NBA players, to be Grammy-nominated musicians, to work in the White House, to have their own therapy practice. So just watching what happens with these young people as they move forward is a great gift in terms of being able to mentor them to understand the demands and the necessity of being relied upon. And so I still stay in touch with all of these folks. They still talk to me. Occasionally I'll get a phone call that one of them's dealing with a crisis and how should they handle it. So it's wonderful to be able to pass on that type of a legacy.
That really is a living legacy in so many ways, being able to teach people such amazing leadership, in many ways, kind of gifts, because where would they learn this anywhere else?
Exactly. It's people learn by seeing what's going on around them. They learn by people being intentional about giving them responsibility and then giving them the freedom to fail and helping them back up instead of criticizing, help them understand where the failure happened and how to make sure it doesn't happen again in an uplifting and mentoring way instead of a condescending and cruel way, for lack of a better word.
And what a legacy. I just love that. And so for those leaders today, because so many people are driving into work right now. So for those leaders today that are feeling completely burnt out and maybe just emotionally distant, what would you say to them?
I would say take some time. Take some time of quiet reflection every day. I spend a lot of time between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. Just quietly reading. I spend a lot of time writing. Writing for me has been some of the best therapy in terms of recentering. I never considered myself a writer, but in journaling, in writing down all of the thoughts, the feelings that particularly I was going through with all of these surgeries with Shelley, it gave me time to reflect. It gave me time to process the thoughts that were deep in my mind, and basically it was very good self therapy. And when you get done, you can go back, you can review those notes, you can review those journals, and it's a good reminder of how far you've come.
Well, my goodness, Jay, you're such an inspiration. Where can people go to learn more about your work and to be part of your community?
They can see me on my website, jacobsonprostaff.com. That is my website for my staffing company. It also is host of my blog post, and it also has a link for purchasing my book, Lead by Legendary Example.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
And thank you for hosting.
Well, thank you, Jay Jacobson. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Lead by Legendary Example. To learn more about Jay's work, please visit his website, jacobsonprostaff.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.